So I am going to tell you about mice today. And so some of these mice facts are going to be a little bit weird, maybe a little bit uncomfortable. If we're going to get to any weird stuff, I'll let you know in advance and you can maybe decide, hey, this is the time when I want to go get a drink of water, go to the bathroom, something like that. But I'm going to tell you a lot of stuff about mice. So why am I telling you about mice? Well, I have a degree in biology. I went to MIT, and this is not the kind of biology degree where you go watch animals do their thing. This is the kind where you work in biotech labs. And I think I had one class that dealt with a whole animal. Most of the classes that I took talked about parts of the animal or how they work together, the chemistry. And then I went to graduate school, but then I dropped out of graduate school. So the interesting thing about graduate school is it takes a really long time. And biology takes an extra long time, particularly if you work with mice. So the average length of time people were in PhD programs at my graduate school, the Tufts School of Medicine, was something like 7.5 years. And I was working with mice, and mice breed more slowly, so I would have been there even longer. So I dropped out and got a job in biotech because you can do that without having a PhD, which is kind of a secret that people don't always tell you. But back to the mice. So I spent at least 3 years running a transgenic mouse colony in one of the labs at MIT. And so this is what it looks like. You just have racks and racks and racks of mice in little mouse cages. And my job was to take care of them. So I did breeding and mouse dissection and mouse tissue culture and surgery. At one point, I also worked for about a year in a hamster behavior lab. So we'll get into some more of that later. When you work in a mouse lab at a university, you have to wear what you call PPE, personal protective equipment. So this makes me look like I'm a doctor going in to do surgery. But really the point here is to keep me out of the mice and the mice off of me. But the more important thing is to make sure that I'm not contaminating the mice, because some of the mice, they might have special conditions that require making sure you aren't cross-contaminating. So this means a hairnet, a face mask, a gown, and gloves on my hands. And so this is what the mouse cages look like. You'd have mice hanging around down here and dry pellet food, and they could gnaw on the pellet food through these bars. And then there's a water bottle right here. And not all of the cages did this, but sometimes you could hook up a ventilation system to make sure that you get all the stinky mouse smells out of the cage. So the other things that I do now, since I don't work in a mouse lab anymore, and I don't do surgery and dissection, I do some mouse taxidermy. And I'm kind of more enthusiastic than I am high quality, but it's fun to do. This is my mouse. And I have a duck mouse and a rat with glowing eyes and some conjoined twin mice. And Kieran and Rohan, these were actually, I don't know if these are still around, but these were for your parents for their wedding. And I think that's one of your cousins. So it's a lot of fun. And if you want to learn how to do this weird little thing, you can go to instructables.com, and I posted tutorials on all of those. But I'm pretty sure that you guys are actually here for the mouse facts. So here's a cute little white mouse. Basic facts about mice. They like to run. They can run fast. If you can see up here, I've seen numbers that say they can run as fast as 8 miles an hour. I've never actually tested that. But this is, the internet tells me that they can run fast. And if anybody's ever tried to catch a mouse, they can move really fast over short distances. Admittedly, they also do a lot of this, and then they dive underneath something, but it's not as if they'd be going and running a marathon or anything like that, but for short distances, they can move it. All right, next, mice can jump. So the standard number that you see for mice is that they can jump at least 18 inches and that they can survive a fall from at least 10 feet. Obviously, these things vary. But I would say all of these things are minimum, because I've seen mice jump out of a kitchen-sized trash can. And they can't jump out of one of those big outdoor-sized trash cans unless you have some trash in it. But you put anything in there and they're just like little springs, boom, boom, boom. So that's a pretty agile little creature. Mice also swim really well. Rats can too. All rodents are pretty good swimmers. So they can apparently do so for hours. This is a thing that sometimes scientists will do, is they'll test their swimming ability and see how different things change their swimming ability. So mice have prehensile tails. And I think prehensile tails are some of the coolest things ever. So you'll notice that some monkeys, largely New World monkeys that live in the Americas, have prehensile tails, and that means that they can curl their tails around things to help them balance. Mice do this too. And so here you can see this mouse is trying desperately to get some of the flowers down at the end, and it's got its tail curved around. They use it for balance, they use it to steady themselves, they use it they can't really grab onto things like another hand, but they can do kind of a big loop.
Hello.
So the other thing is mice can squeeze into tiny, tiny spaces. If you've ever seen a mouse and gone, where did it go? And then you go see where it went, and it turns out that there's this tiny little crack or this tiny little hole, and how on earth did the mouse get out? They can fit through anything that their skull can fit through. And their skulls are pretty small, right? So here we've got, this is about 5 centimeters long and about 2 centimeters wide. So anything that they can fit their skull through, plus just a little bit of fur around, they can squish the rest of their body and they can go through it. So here you've got a little testing apparatus, and they've got some snacks in there. That looks like it's probably peanut butter. Mice love peanut butter. It smells wonderful. And so the mouse is going through each of the little holes one after another to try and get the peanut butter treat. All right. So mice really like to feel tight and safe and protected. So not only can they squeeze through little holes, it makes them feel safe and really super comfortable. So one of the things that is interesting, so mice are a prey species, right? Cats eat them, predatory birds eat them, lots of things will eat mice. So they like to feel safe and kind of tucked in and secure. But they can get infected by a parasite called Toxoplasmosis gondii, and this is carried by many cats. And one of the interesting things that happens, because this is part of the parasite's life cycle, it goes through a cat, and then the cat poops, and then the mouse picks up the parasite from the cat feces, but it affects the mouse's brain and behavior. And when a mouse is infected with Toxoplasmosis gondii, it loses its fear of cats. The smell of cats don't scare them anymore. They don't keep to corners and edges like they normally would, so they come out in the open, which makes them more likely to be eaten by a cat, and then the life cycle of the parasite can continue. It's kind of creepy. So the other thing to know about this is that humans can also be infected with Toxoplasmosis gondii, and it's particularly problematic for pregnant women. That's why pregnant women are advised not to clean cat litter boxes, but it also changes human behaviors. So I'm not going to get into the details of that now, but it doesn't necessarily make them more likely to be eaten by cats, but it seems to make humans more tolerant of cats. Maybe that's why we like looking at cat pictures on the internet. We all have cat parasites, I don't know. But it also, people are finding that it may change behavior in more subtle ways as well. So, mouse facts. I said that they like to be squished. They like to be squished while they sleep. They sleep in big mouse piles. These are some juvenile siblings, and it's kind of adorable. So they're rodents, and their teeth continue growing. This is true of all rodents. So it's true of mice and rats and hamsters. It's also true of squirrels, beavers, rabbits, things like that. So their teeth will keep growing, and they have to chew on things to grind their teeth down, because otherwise, if you see this mouse here on the right, its teeth will just keep growing and growing and growing, and then it can't eat, and eventually they'll grow into its brain, or into the jaw, into the skin. But it would probably starve before that because it can't eat. So that's why all the rodents that you see, they chew, 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 chew. They will chew through anything. That's a little problematic if you have a house that a mouse wants to get into, because the mouse or the rat will come into your house. They like to chew on cables. So at work, my office has a mouse problem. There was in the first floor, there are some restaurants, and they were redoing the restaurants, and apparently they broke into a spot where there were mice nesting. And then the mice were able to get into a duct that took them all the way up through the building. So they were able to go up floors, 20 floors, and visit other parts of the building that they had not had access to before. And so you had people who had snacks at their desks. The mice got in there. Mice can smell chocolate from a bazillion miles away. It's like they have a homing beacon for chocolate. They ate the chocolate in people's desks. They left mouse poop in their desks. They chew on people's cords. So that's been a real problem. But again, why are they chewing on all these things if it's not food? Because they want to wear their teeth down. So rats have bigger jaws than mice. They can chew through things faster. Think about a beaver. A beaver will chew through a tree, right? That's some serious wear on your teeth. We wouldn't want to do that. So this picture is not, the mouse did not chew through that. Somebody staged this picture, just so you're clear on that. That's not what it looks like after a mouse has been chewing. It doesn't stick up like that. But what do they eat in the wild? Right? So they're omnivores, and omnivore means that you eat everything, omni, all. So here we go, we've got a mouse chewing on its dry pellets in lab, but if given a choice, a mouse would eat something far tastier. So here's a mouse that's found some raspberries. That's a happy mouse. Here you've got a mouse who's found some grain, again, a much happier mouse. And here you've got some mice eating a cricket. So they'll eat grubs, they'll eat insects, they'll eat fruits, they'll eat vegetables, they'll eat whatever. And of course, if they get into your house, they'll eat whatever that they can find that you have. So here's a picture of Pizza Rat. Pizza Rat in New York has found a slice of pizza and is super happy. I don't know how long the rat's going to be able to get a set of meals off of that, but that's a happy rat. Here's a mouse who's been eating a chocolate bar, right? This looks pretty standard mouse chewing. You get lots of little pieces because they're going through everything and trying to get to the food underneath. The other thing is, once they start being a little bit limited in the food, maybe you start putting things away, things that maybe are not their favorite. You put away all the chocolate, pizza out, put all of your other stuff in containers that they can't get through. They'll do things like eat the sweaty armpits of your shirts. They will eat your dirty underwear. Anything that has salty secretions on it from a human body, right? They're going to be excited. Hey, this is interesting. This is tasty. I'm going to chew on that. And then after they eat, what do? Well, they pee and poop on everything. And that's also one of the ways that they mark their territory. So they smell. Smell is one of their primary senses. That's how they tell who's been there, what's going on, are there any cats, are there other mice. There's special chemicals in the male mouse's urine that are especially strong smelling so that they can mark out territory. All right, how do you tell apart male and female mice? So you look at something called the anogenital distance, and that's the distance, pardon me, between the anus, where the mouse poops, and the genitals. So This one is a female. This is the anus, and this is the vagina. And this is a male. This is the anus, and this is the penis. And so you see it's a lot farther away. It's easier to tell in an adult. Sometimes you'll also be able to see swollen testicles, especially in a warm area in the male. But when you're trying to figure out whether it's a boy or a girl and they're just a day or two old, that gets a little trickier. So here, this is a male, larger anogenital distance, and this is a female, a very relatively smaller anogenital distance. So this is a thing that takes practice, but you need to figure out fairly quickly which ones are boys and which ones are girls, so you can put them in the proper cages and you don't have unexpected mouse breeding. So here's some mice that are mating, and I used to manage this for our lab, right? That's why I was also checking the pups. And so this is actually a hamster, not a mouse. You can tell it's a hamster because it's got this little stumpy tail and a slightly different face shape. But this is called lordosis position. And when the animals are mating, the female will put her rear end up in the air for better access for the male. So I used to work in a hamster lab. And one of the things that's interesting about Syrian hamsters, this kind of hamster, is they're very territorial. So the males and the females, they have their own burrows. They are not invited into each other's burrows. The only time that the female will tolerate the male being in her space is if she's ready to mate. So my job as a student is I would get, you know, those red the drinking cups, the disposable cups. I would get one of those and I'd get the male cage out and the female cage out. And I'd scoop up the female. And you don't put the male in the female cage because that's her territory. And if you put a male in her territory, she's going to try and kill him. And he's not going to defend himself. And she's going to probably kill him if you don't take him out. So what you do is you scoop up the female and you put the female in the male's cage. And she's going, whoa, I'm in another hamster space. She's kind of freaked out a little bit. And then the male comes over and sniffs. Ooh, it's a female. Are you a receptive female who might want to mate with me? And if she is, then they mate. And then I scoop her back out before she decides to go try and kill him and maybe take over his space. But sometimes she's not ready to mate and she gets annoyed and tries to kill him. So basically my job is to sit there with this little red cup, dump her in there, and then go and wait to see if she's going to try and kill him now or if she's going to try and kill him in about 5 minutes. So Syrian hamsters, very territorial. That was an interesting thing. But you could tell if she was ready to mate because she would go into lordosis position, and then you'd have about 3 to 5 minutes of trying to make sure that everything was okay. So going back to mice, one of the things that you need to know if you're working with embryonic mice is you need to know when the animals mated, so you know how far along the pups are in gestation, because you can't tell that just by looking at a mouse's pregnant belly, and we weren't doing mouse ultrasounds. So one of the things that's interesting is that when mice mate, the mouse semen leaves behind a little plug. It gets hard and plugs the vagina to try and, this is the male's reproductive strategy to prevent other males from mating with the same female. So one of the things that I also got to do when I was working in the mouse labs was go down every morning, first thing in the morning, and check. We'd have a little rounded glass capillary tube, and you just go check and see if there was a plug in the mouse's vagina to see if they had mated. You wouldn't always find one. Sometimes you'd miss one, and then you'd say, why is this female pregnant? I don't remember finding one. But you got most of them, and it helped you figure out how old the pups were. All right, now we're into the dissection pictures. So this is a male mouse, and these are the testicles, seminal vesicles, and more gonadal tissue. So and this is the female, and the female has a two-horned uterus, right? The human uterus is basically just one little bag because we have one, possibly two young at a time, right? Twins are kind of unusual, it's usually one. But with a mouse, they have a litter because the mouse's reproductive strategy is everything eats us. So we're gonna have lots and lots of babies and hope some of them survive. And we're gonna have them frequently. And they'll get eaten by hawks. They'll be eaten by ferrets. They'll be eaten by cats, but some of them will survive because I'll have a lot. So here you can see lots and lots, all of these are little mouse pups that are being dissected out. So one of the things that I did a lot of was dissecting out mouse pups, and that's why you would need to know what stage of development they were in. By the way, if anybody has questions, I can't see raised hands, but if anybody has questions, you can either save them for the end or maybe hop in. So here are some cute and adorable little pinky mouse pups shortly after birth, and the mom is cleaning them up, and then they're all frantically trying to nurse or sleep. But they're pretty cute. So the gestation period for a mouse is 19 to 21 days. That's from the time that the mouse gets pregnant to the time that the mouse gives birth. It's about 3 weeks. So the litter sizes, depending on the type of mouse, sometimes it's as low as 6 or as high as 20. But again, it depends on how much food they have, how safe they feel, and what kind of mice they are. The other interesting things, the females, on the day they give birth, they can get pregnant again. So that means that increases the speed at which they can have more mice, more pups. And again, hopefully some of those will survive all the predators that they face. But of course, in a lab, it's not really a predator issue. But that means that if I want to make sure that this female does not mate again, I have to take the male out of the cage. Let's see. And here are some mouse embryos at different stages. So here we go. We've got day 11 and a half through day 14. Here it kind of looks like a little squiggly worm. And then by day 18 here, it starts looking like a mouse. This is a sagittal section. It's cut down the middle. And so you're looking at the side view of a mouse. And then over here, we have the external view. We have a sagittal section, which is cut down the middle, a coronal section, which is cut, it's coronal like a crown. And so it's like you cut across where the crown was, but you're doing sections this way. And then transverse sections are across. If you don't know what you're looking at, this is really weird stuff, right? But if you look down here, so these are mice, and then these are humans. One of the really cool things is the early phases of human development look a lot like some of the phases of development. Humans even have a tail, and we have a tail, and then it disappears over the course of gestation. So one of the things that I thought was super cool is I've got 2 kids, and when I went to see, have a ultrasound done, and they scan through and are basically looking at different slices with the ultrasound, focusing at different points, I knew what I was looking at because I was familiar with all of these cross-sectional pieces of mice. And I knew, oh, that's a heart. This is I'm looking at the skull. I'm looking at different organs and different parts. So it's kind of cool. But it does take some getting used to and figuring out what you're looking at. So another way you can look at developing mice is by staining the bone and cartilage. So here we've got the blue, it's called Alcyon blue, and that stains cartilage. Bone is stained by Alzarian red. And so here's a 14.5-day mouse embryo. Most of the bone is cartilage, but there's a little bit of bone starting in the middle, but then 4 days later, there's so much more bone here. The bone has grown out, and eventually it's going to be all bone. And again, this is the same thing that happens with humans and all other animals. We grow the cartilage first, and then the bone starts in the middle and spreads out. So here, again, we have bone and cartilage stained for a 14.5-day-old mouse embryo. You can see it's got these little tiny bands of bone in the middle of the long bones. And you can see the ribs and parts of the jaw and a little bit of the head. And then this is just 2 days later, 16.5-day embryo, a lot more bone. It's called ossification when you turn the cartilage into bone. So it's really cool. You can see progressions as the bones form and as the cartilage turns into bone. I did some of this too. It's super cool. All right. So we talked about how mice reproduce rapidly because their strategy is producing lots of offspring because they have lots of predators. If they have infinite food supply, they'll just keep mating and reproducing and having pups. And if you start with one pregnant mouse, by the end of the year, that pregnant mouse could potentially have 4,500 children, grandchildren, great-great-great-great-grandchildren. So if you have a mouse in your house, you need to do something about it fairly quickly. But also think about if you were a farmer and you had a bunch of grain. You do not, this is why you had barn cats, to prevent mice from getting into your grain and your seed stocks and just eating it all. Also, this is a good reason not to leave food out in your house or in your office if you know that there are mice. Now we have some more icky stuff. Rodents are notorious for transmitting diseases. So things like the bubonic plague, they carried the fleas that gave everyone bubonic plague. There are other things that are transferred in their saliva, in their urine, in their feces. So really, aside from pets that we know are in good shape, you don't want to mess with wild rodents of any sort. You can still get plague from prairie voles and prairie dogs in the Western US. So here in California, sometimes we end up with ground squirrels with plague. And you can treat that because it's bacterial. We can give you antibiotics, but no one wants to get bubonic plague. It's kind of gross. So there are more things that rodents transmit than I've listed here. These are just some of the exciting ones, but the CDC has a very long list of things that you can get from rodents. All right, so that's my main list of uncomfortable mouse facts. And now I'm gonna pause for some questions, and then we could potentially go on to some other rodents that are related. Does anybody have questions?
Feel free to unmute yourselves if you have questions. No need to be shy.
All right, well, I'll talk about some other rodents, and then we can go back and start thinking about questions, because I know that there's got to be something that I was
have
either
a
not.
question.
Oh, yes.
Hi, it's Michelle. I noticed a beautiful shot of a dissected mouse. That wasn't a dissection you did, was it?
No, that was not.
Yeah, it was. I've never seen something so clean before. How does one do that?
Well, so first you euthanize the mouse, right? Step one is you humanely euthanize the mouse. Usually that's a shot of something that puts them to sleep. And then you cut into the abdominal cavity and fold the skin open. So I'll go back to that picture. It's actually really straightforward. I just taught a class of 4th graders last year how to dissect mice. And generally speaking, they're very tidy little creatures. And when you open them up, you look at it and say, wow, there's so much neat stuff in there. So I highly recommend that anyone who's not totally opposed to it for ethical reasons, find the opportunity to do some dissection, because the interior of bodies are so amazingly cool.
Do you Do you have
Pardon
to
me?
section things off? Do you have to clear out any goo, or is it really that tidy when you open them up?
Well, so it does look like they may have, so they folded the uterus out over top of some of the intestines, right? You see some intestines here, but there's also some that are going to be covered up. There's not a lot of interstitial fluid in the abdomen. You just have to make sure that you cut through into the peritoneal cavity basically without popping the intestines or the stomach, right? So it's pretty straightforward because there's some extra space there. And so what you do is you kind of pull up the skin and it's just like opening up a bag of anything else that you're trying not to damage the interior, because you have a layer of skin and then you have the peritoneal cavity, and that's this second layer here. So you can see there's a separate layer of the skin and then the abdominal wall. So you cut through the skin, you peel the skin back, you cut through the abdominal wall and peel that back. There's a little bit of interstitial fluid, but not a lot, right? We're fairly tidy. If you do this to a human, it's not that different.
Whoa, well, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
There was a question from the chat. Can we do capybaras?
Well, let's go down to the other rodents. And so first of all, I can't go into great detail about capybaras because I do not have huge amounts of capybara specific knowledge, but I do have some pictures of other rodents. And who would like to tell me what I'm looking at here? What are these two rodents? I need a volunteer.
Rats.
What? There are two different
That came
rodents.
from-
Which,
yeah.
maybe I should say, which one is the mouse and which one is the rat?
The one on the right is a rat and the one on the left is a mouse. From the chat.
Correct. And so, okay, let me see if I can pull the chat up so I can see this. So if you look at them from face on, right, the rat is bigger. But if you look at the rat's jaw and the shape of its nose, it's slightly bigger. See here, the mouse has a pointy little head. The rat has a much more muscular jaw. So here, is this a mouse or a rat on the left? Knowing what I just told you.
Rat.
Correct. Right? It's got a muscular jaw and a more blunt nose. Mice have usually delicate little pointy noses. And this looks a lot more blunt. Okay. Does anybody know what this rodent is on the right? I used to have one of these when I was in elementary school. Keely, any guesses?
We have a question. Well, Keely said roof rat, and then we also have a question. How long do they live?
The question about how long they live in captivity, a couple of years. But in the wild, life is nasty, brutish, and short. And if you get old or sick, you are much more likely to be eaten. So again, it depends on where they are, how safe they are in that spot, how much food they have, and what kind of predators are in that area. So the one on the right here is a gerbil. So gerbils live in the desert. Whoop. Gerbils live in the desert. They have particularly pungent smelling urine because they do not put very much liquid out through their urine. And they are nocturnal like most rodents. All right. What are we looking at here? These are two varieties of the same kind of rodent. Oops, pardon me.
Are they hamsters?
These are. So the size is a little bit confusing because of the way that I've blown them up. But this is a Russian dwarf hamster or Siberian dwarf hamster. And they're about the same size as a mouse. But think of, say, a mouse that's basically wearing a big fuzzy fur coat that's 3 sizes too big. It's like in a fat suit on top of a mouse. Their skin is very loose, and it really is like they're wearing a coat that's too big for them. And so this is a teddy bear hamster, which is a variant of a Syrian hamster that's been bred for its coat color. So one of the really cool things about hamsters is that they have cheek pouches. So if you look at this hamster, it's shoving a peanut in its face. It's already got several peanuts in its face. It's trying to get as many in there as possible. So if you're a mouse and you want to gather food, you have to carry it in your teeth and then go put it wherever you're hiding the food. If you're a hamster, you've got these big, giant built-in cargo pockets. So if you look at a hamster, I don't know if you can see my little picture here, but the cheek pouch starts right here in their cheek, and then it goes all the way back to their shoulder. So all the way back here behind their shoulder. These things are huge, and they can just stuff them full of seeds and nuts and all sorts of other tasty goodies. They take it back to their burrow, and then they empty it out. They actually take their little paws and push from the back and empty out their cheek pouches into their food stores. So here's another example of a Syrian hamster. They're also desert dwellers. These are the ones that are fiercely territorial and that I and my little red cup had to take care of while they were mating. But they live in the desert, and they make these really nice tunnel systems. Hamsters are very fastidious. Unlike mice, which will basically just drop poop behind them as they go. You know, they just sort of, and they drop wherever they are when they need to poop, they just poop there. Hamsters will have a separate bathroom tunnel. So they'll have a main area where they nest and where they hang out and socialize if they do any of that, where they raise their pups. They'll have lots and lots of food storage areas, right? Again, they can bring that all back in their cheek pouches and deposit it in their burrow. But then they'll have a separate bathroom tunnel, and they will go there and deposit any poop in that area, and they'll try and pee in that area too. And then periodically they'll fill that tunnel in and then go dig a new one, which is very different from the way mice behave. All right, what are these? And so if somebody types it into the chat, that's awesome. And maybe you can read it to me because I cannot see that for whatever reason. I'll give you another couple seconds to have a guess.
From Kieran and Rohan, guinea pig.
Yes, correct. These are guinea pigs, sometimes called cavies. And they are much bigger. They're not the biggest rodents, but they're a decent sized rodent. And lots of people keep these as pets. They're very skittish, but they deal with being handled. If you have pet guinea pigs, or if you, this is the next picture is one you may not want to look at. So guinea pigs are raised for food in Peru, and they're pretty tasty. They taste like squirrel. I've had some, but they are raised as meat animals, much in the way that many people do rabbits. So the standard way to do this is to cook them grilled, and they're pretty tasty. All right, and then I have 3 more. Does anybody have any guesses as to what some of these are? I'll give you a hint. Somebody was asking about another kind of rodent. Now is your chance.
Capybara in all caps.
Yes, Yes, there's a capybara on the right. So that is a very large rodent. It's the biggest one. And then any guesses as to who we have on the left? They are smaller. I'm going to just give you these. The first one here is a vole, and then we have an agouti. So capybaras and agoutis live in the capybaras are down in South America largely, but we were just in the Yucatan, and the things that were getting in our trash were agoutis and raccoons. So it was pretty exciting to see an agouti live in person streaking across the lawn with something it had gotten out of the trash. They're the size of small cats, and then the capybara is the size of sort of a medium, smallish medium dog, but very bulky. And as you can see here, its face is much more blunt, and that also looks more like a beaver face, right? If you put a beaver tail on this and kind of changed its proportions a little bit more, you can see how they're related. All right, well, that's the last slide I have. I would be happy to answer any other mouse questions that anybody has, or other rodent questions if I can possibly answer them.
What's the predator of a capybara?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know an awful lot about capybaras in the wild, but I would imagine that big cats would certainly eat them. I'm on much safer turf when it comes to things like hamsters and
Well,
hamsters and mice. So yes,
we have a question. What's your favorite rodent?
I love these little dwarf hamsters. So first of all, hamsters make better house pets than mice because of the fact that their urine is not as strongly scented, and they're very tidy about where they pee and poop. So if you're considering having rodents as pets, hamsters over mice. They're not as smart as rats, but again, rats can be very stinky. But I really like hamsters, and I really like the dwarf hamsters because they're just much easier to handle than the bigger ones. And they're ridiculously cute. They're fat, they're roly-poly. And I love rodents with cheek pouches. The cheek pouches are just adorable. So if I were, I hope my kids are not listening to this, but if you're going to try and convince me to get rodents again, I would definitely have the dwarf hamsters. I have had a lot of dwarf hamsters at home before.
Do we have any other questions? Ah, yes, from Annabella. Do rats get along with other rats?
You know, I'm not sure about unrelated rats, but speaking with all of these animals, siblings will get along. And so provided they don't spend time apart. So for example, with mice, you can have a male-female pair. You can put multiple females in a cage, but you can't put multiple unrelated males in a cage. So generally, if we want to store males in a cage, what we'll do is we'll take siblings, brothers, and put them in a cage together. So my presumption there with rats, again, I haven't managed a rat colony, is that you can have a male-female pair. You can have unrelated sibling or unrelated females together. But if you wish to have multiple males, they might need to be family members who have always lived together.
We have another question. Our class had a guinea pig a couple of years ago. It was hard to find someone to adopt him at the end of the year. Do you have any suggestions about what to do with unadopted guinea pigs aside from roasting them?
No. Sorry. The other thing is the guinea pigs that we have here have been bred for things like coat color. And the guinea pigs that are being raised for food have been bred specifically to have more meat. So I don't even know if I would suggest eating them. I would suggest that classes not have pets without a backup plan.
Keely, if you can unmute and share, she says she has some ideas. And we also—
Sorry, I had to unmute myself like 3 different places. So this is for guinea pigs specifically, right?
Yes.
Question. Yeah, so there is a national association for cavies, as they're referred to. And so you can reach out to the American Society of Cavies and see if somebody there, they've got a youth program that raise and breed and educate on cavies. And they may have some interest. They may have kids that are starting in the program that would be also interested in taking the cavies that you no longer want, which are also known as guinea pigs.
Cool.
We have— thank you for that. That was pretty great.
So just so you guys know, some kids raise them and show them, just like you would show a dog, or if you've ever seen, any other shows where they're displaying how the animal looks and how well it's groomed and how well it's taken care of. And so the American Cavie Association also has a program where kids learn more about the biology and the anatomy and health and diseases, and then show their animals.
Cool. Is this the sort of thing, Keely, that say 4-H clubs might also be interested in?
Yes, so you can also reach out to your local 4-H and see if they have a program that has cavies or guinea pigs. And some of them even have all sorts of different animal programs, rats and mice and things like that people raise. And believe it or not, you can even show your cats their cat program. So my daughter invested a lot of time in this area, but rabbits and pigs specifically, but she started out in horses, which Christy also have to have their teeth ground down if they don't chew too much, because they continue to grow.
Cool. Anybody else have questions?
We do. 2 questions. One from Kieran and Rohan. Have you ever had a mouse dive into a large Cheetos bag or other junk food bags?
No, because I don't leave junk food out, but I have definitely seen, this is really dating back to college where people have terrible, terrible habits. I have definitely seen mice jump into piles of food that people have left on the ground. College students leaving pizza on the floor, bad idea. The worst situation that I ever saw was one in which a mouse was trying to evade capture and jumped into the sink, into the garbage disposal.
That's dramatic.
That was dramatic.
And we have from Annabella, how big can mice get? And have you ever had a pet mouse or rat? And Keely just commented, ew.
Yeah, so mice will not get much longer than about 5-6 inches, something like that. Or how big is that? About that big, right? They'll sit on the palm of your hand, but then they just sort of get fat if you feed them and you don't give them exercise. Most wild mice just they're sleek and svelte because they have to be able to run and jump and get their food. But again, this is if it's given as much food as it wants and it's kept as a pet, they just sort of start growing sideways. They'll still fit in your hand, but they'll be almost a sphere. Let's see. Rats grow to be about this long. And again, elderly rats who just sit in a cage and eat can just, if anybody's seen Ratatouille, you see some of those rats are really fat. Those are well-fed rats and elderly rats. And in much the same way that if humans eat junk food and they do not move, they end up kind of spherical. Same thing can happen to mice and rats. But I have not kept mice and rats as pets. That's been all lab work for me, partially because, as I said, they're really stinky. And that's not something that I wanted to keep in my house as a pet. So that's why I went for hamsters as pets. Also, the cheek pouches. Any more questions?
I don't see any more in the chat.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I really like talking about rodents, and they do neat stuff, and they're totally adorable. So
This
thanks
was a
for
lot
listening.
of fun. Thank you so much for doing this. I learned so much today.
All right, and hopefully some things that were useful as opposed to just uncomfortable mouse facts.
And Keely says thank you. We have chats
You're
coming in
welcome.
saying thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
great
right.
day.
Take care.